Good day and welcome to the last chapter or the last part of the botany course for the first years. It is chapter 6 that deals with plant taxonomy. Now the word taxonomy may sound weird to you and you may have never heard about it before, but basically it deals with identification and naming of living organisms. So if you look at the basic definition of taxonomy, it is the science that deals with the identification, nomenclature or naming and classification of, in this case, plants. But taxonomy also refers to all living organisms in the world. So all living organisms in this world have got a scientific name, and that name is assigned through the science of taxonomy. Now, taxonomy has basically three different components. The first one is the identification part of the organisms, and that is in this case the grouping of plants with common characteristics. So, for example, if we have 5 different plant species that all carry pods as fruit, then they might be grouped into the same family. And if we go down further, if the pods are all brown, for example, they might further be classified or identified into a specific genera. The second part of taxonomy is what is called nomenclature, which is the description and the naming, in this case, of plants. Now, as I mentioned before, it is not only plants. All living organisms in this world have got a scientific name. We'll get to how that name came about and how it is used in the world in the next slide. The last part of taxonomy is the part that deals with classification. And that is basically the arrangement of organisms, in this case plants, into a natural system. Now, for example, mosses and ferns aren't classified into the same group as what flowering plants are. So flowering plants are different from mosses and ferns. They are more evolved and therefore classified into a different group. So if we focus a bit more on the naming or the nomenclature of living organisms, this was a science that was developed a long time ago by a man called Carolus Linnaeus. He was what we call the father of nomenclature, or the naming of organisms. And he suggested and he developed a system which is called binomial nomenclature. And that basically means that all living organisms their names are composed of 2 parts. The first part is something that is called the genus, and the second part is something which is called the species or the species name. Now, just as an example, humans also have a scientific binomial name, and that is Homo sapiens. It is the way that we identify all living organisms. So, if we look at plants, this example is a sweet thorn tree or soetdoringboom here in the Karoo, and again it has 2 names. Yeah, it's one name but with 2 separate parts. The first part, which is called the genus name, and that is Acacia, and that is like your family name, your surname. So if, for example, myself, my father has got a surname van den Berg, my mother is van den Berg, and my sister is van den Berg. We all are in the same family. So we all look the same, or look just a little bit the same, but we all look different. We are in the same family or the same genus, but we're all different individuals. And that is what the species name refers to. So acacia, there's a number of acacia species in the world, but there's only one Acacia Karoo. In this case, Karoo refers to the location where this tree was first found. That species name can refer to surnames of people. It can refer to the name the names or the colors of flowers. So the binomial nomenclature system just means that every living organism, their names is composed of a genus name and a species name. Now there's a couple of rules, international rules regarding the use of these names, and you have to remember all these rules. It is, like I said, it's international rules, so if you use it incorrectly, it is wrong. So next year you will be asked to compile an assignment with plants. You'll have to find and press dwarf shrubs and grasses, and you'll have to put their scientific name to them. And the first rule is that all botanical names are in Greek or Latin. It is difficult to understand for us why it is like that, but as I explained earlier, this binomial nomenclature system helps us to identify organisms throughout the world. Now, just as an example of why we use this, is that, for example, here in the Central Karoo and in the arid Karoo, there are two dwarf shrub species called skaalbosses, but it might be a totally different species in the arid Karoo than what it is here. But if we use the scientific name or the botanical name, we all know exactly what species we refer to. The second rule, standing rule, is that the genus name of the organism always starts with a capital letter. And the species name or the second name always starts with a small letter. And I stress this again, if you do this incorrectly, it is wrong. And the last rule about botanical names is that if they are typed, they are always typed in italics, while if they are written, they are always underlined. So if you underline them, if you write the scientific name, it is not one solid line under the whole name. These two words are underlined individually. Okay, please do this correctly next year in your felt management assignment. Now, just to show you an example of plants that are in the same genus, which means they look a little bit similar. They have some similar characteristics, but they are definitely different species. The example that I want to use is, again, the sweet thorn tree or Acacia karoo, and a species that occurs in America, which is called Acacia aphylla. Now, if you look at these two photos, on first glance, it doesn't look like these species belong in the same genera at all. The one looks like a shrub, while the other one is a tree. Even if you look at their branches, you would still guess that they are not in the same genus. It doesn't seem like they have characteristics that are similar to one another. But if you focus a little bit further and you look at the flowers, you can see that these two species have got exactly the same type of flowers, okay, which makes them to occur or to be grouped into the same genus. And the same goes for the fact that both of these two species, even though the whole plant doesn't look the same, they both carry pods as fruit. Okay, so when we delve a bit deeper into botany for the rest of your career as agriculturalists, you need to know about 3 plant families. All crops that is used for agriculture is basically grouped into these three plant families. The first one is the legume family, or Fabaceae. Yeah, that is things like lucerne or soya beans or beans and peas that we eat as vegetables. They are all legumes. And the basic characteristics that groups them into the same family is the fact that all of the legumes have got nitrogen fixing bacteria that grows on their roots, or rhizobium. The second characteristic that groups them into the same family is the fact that all legumes have compound leaves. So not simple leaves, they have compound leaves with the axillary bud in the axil between the stem and the leaf. All flowers are pea-like flowers. All the flowers of the legumes look exactly the same, even though they might be different colors. The structure of the flowers are all the same. And then the last characteristic that makes the legumes special is the fact that all legumes have pods as fruit, with a seed inside the pod. The second family that you need to know is the Asteraceae, or the daisy family. And in this family is sunflowers, for example. They are daisies, or in the Asteraceae family. They always have alternate or opposite leaves. The leaves are simple, they're not compound like the legumes, but they've got a different type of flower. They've got what we call daisy heads. And if you look at a sunflower closely, you'll see what a daisy head looks like. And the fruit, if you look at a sunflower seed, that what we call a seed, that's actually a fruit, it is called an achene. And all Asteraceae have the same type of fruit. The last family that is important for you as agriculturalists is the Poaceae family, or the grasses. Now, grasses are the feed stock of the world. Corn is a grass, wheat is a grass, and rice is a grass. I referred to this earlier in some of our other presentations. But all these grasses have also got the same characteristics. They've got stems that is hollow and round. They've got leaves with leaf sheaths. And their flowers are carried in inflorescences. Inflorescence, again, is flowers that is grouped together. So know these plant families. They might become important in the rest of your career.